Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show. And yes, I'm your host, Rick Franzi. And boy, do we have a good show planned for you today. Why do you ask? Well, you seem to ask that every show. And the answer is because we have a great guest. As you can see on the screen, Dr. Sophia Nnenna is our guest, and she's the founder of the Sophia Consulting Firm. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Orange County's longest running business talk show.
You nailed it. Look at you. I'm so impressed. Let's look back in time, and as an entrepreneur, help us to understand the motivation, the inspiration that you had to launch your consulting.
You know, it's interesting because I was born in Africa. I was born in West Africa in Nigeria, and my parents named me Sophia for two different reasons. So my father named me Sophia because he had a minor crush on Sophia Loren, the actress. He thought she was beautiful. And my mother named me Sophia because the name meant wisdom. So I went with the latter definition through my mom. And I said to question my legacy. What is my legacy? When I leave this earth, what do I want to be remembered for? And this is 4 or 5 year old me having these very deep thoughts. But before I could actually get a trademark on it, my idea was around amplifying scientific innovation. Science was something that came naturally to me. I was reading the Encyclopedia Britannica for fun as a child. And I wanted to share that same passion and exuberance that I have for science with other people. And I was, my family, everybody is a non-scientist. And I'm the only scientist and the youngest of 5 in addition to that. So I had to have this tenacity in what I wanted to do to be able to sustain that. I also had to work against sort of cultural norms about what a woman should do. You know, science is too difficult. You should probably do something easier. So I put it upon myself to really think about the legacy of the name Sophia, which is why my consultancy is called the Sophia Consulting Firm, leaning into sort of that legacy of wisdom. Now, the idea behind amplifying scientific innovation, it's about taking complex information and making it simple and easy to understand. In addition to that, how do we make scientific leaders, innovators, the people behind all these great medicines and vaccines that we love, how do we make them more accessible to the public, right? So my work is not just about what I do confidentially for clients through management consulting and my advisory services. It's also about sort of the external output. And that's something that I came up with during COVID-19, and I can't wait to share more. But, you know, I like to always think about my roots and connecting the dots with your why and thinking about, you know, 1 or 2 childhood memories that sort of made a big impact on who you become. And something as simple as my name was probably the biggest catalyst into my entrepreneurial journey. And then also thinking through about becoming a scientist and laying down that credibility, because it's so important as an entrepreneur to have a foundation, to say this is sort of somewhat what I do, because people are going to try and turn you one way or the other. Every idea, are you sure you want to do that? So there has to be some tenacity. And I truly, truly believe in amplifying scientific innovation. And that's really what my consultancy does.
So your answer was fascinating. And there at the end, the analogy that you talked about leads me to my next thought, which is when you launched the consulting firm, you had a vision.
Yeah.
Did you have any pivots, or have you had any pivots over the life of the? Okay, can you share those with us?
Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. So when I started my consultancy, I had the idea to form an LLC back in 2017, but I did not fully operationalize until 2019. And that, as you probably will recall, was just a few months before COVID-19 happened. So initially, my idea was to go to medical conferences, train physicians, and get them up to date on how to speak with journalists and how to tell stories about scientific data in a compelling manner. And that's what I used to do. I used to travel all over the world, from Sweden to San Francisco, just to sort of train other people and help in terms of message readiness. But then when COVID-19 happened just a few months after I launched my business, well, all of a sudden we couldn't travel. And I was like, how do I still connect the dots? How do I still have that kind of impact that I aspired for, but now in a situation where we're not allowed to travel? So I decided to come up with a platform, and I called it Amplifying Scientific Innovation. And it was also at a time where I felt that video content was key. So even though a lot of people were launching podcasts, I was like, people need to see faces. They need to see a few smiles here and there, and they need to see the office of today, which is not like this posh thing. The offices that I saw garages, I saw kitchens, I saw living rooms. It was just an office is what you make of it. But it was also a beautiful way to tell the story about how scientific innovation connects the dots for us as humans, right? The impact of the work that we do affects all of us, from the people that are in the lab thinking about it to the people that are in the hospitals administering whatever therapies that are out there. So my story was about bringing hope and also science advocacy at a time when people were creating a lot of fallacies. So yes, I couldn't travel and train medical experts, but then I could leverage my medical expertise to train other people in how to think and receive information about science. So this idea that I had in my head became something slightly bigger than me and ever as ambitious. I did 4 seasons and roughly 2 years. I interviewed about 64 different people that ranged from the CEO of the American Cancer Society to the chief medical officer of WebMD to the president of Biotechnology Innovation Organization, just thinking through leaders at Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, small biotechs, patient advocacy groups. It was really to me about impact and knowing the different voices, the different people that play a role in what scientific innovation is. One of my favorite interviews even back then was with the NIH. They have an NCAT center that is focused on accelerating translational sciences. That's really what that stands for. And people are like, well, what's translational science? Well, translational science is essentially what I've been trying to say. It's about taking complex scientific information, distilling it down to the essence, the why. What is the impact on patients? Why should physicians care? Because that's really what we're trying to do, to become more intentional and purposeful of our work. So how did a podcast change my life as an entrepreneur? Obviously, from a marketing standpoint, it gives you that visibility, thought leadership opportunities, and people start to believe in you, right? Because that's what I learned a long time ago, that people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. So that kind of helped from that perspective, just in terms of setting up that foundation. And then I had to showcase the output of the work, whether that's a white paper, such as the one that I did with the American Society for Gene and Cell Therapies, where we're looking at the innovations that will be impactful for the future in terms of how we treat patients, using their own genetic information to prime their bodies, a new type of science. But really, isn't that what I like to do? Amplifying scientific innovation, but also writing for different outlets, from Entrepreneur to this, very honest piece that I wrote for Inc. magazine. And all of a sudden, I'm connecting with millions of people all over the world. And I see my little LinkedIn network growing incrementally with all these different connections. I'm like, hey, maybe there is real impact here. And I can't wait to connect the dots about sort of my transition from New York to California. But I'll pause a little bit and say hi.
You're one of the easiest guests I've had in a while. I love that. You make my job too easy. I think you've done a great job explaining your passion. Your passion comes through. You're not explaining it. It's obvious. And the focus. I also know that you have an extensive educational background.
That.
That. University of Connecticut, several degrees there, Toledo, Yale School of Medicine.
Yes.
What in your upbringing creates the fire and the desire within you to pursue these advanced degrees at these recognized institutions?
Yeah. It's interesting because my dad had a big influence on my life. He thought I was beautiful and I should get married early. So, and he was opposed to this idea of his daughter becoming a scholar. But by the time I got to my PhD level, he showed up at my graduation and I couldn't get a picture by myself. He's like, oh, my daughter, But I think my story has always been about visualization, like, and tenacity, because much of my journey wasn't supported or understood. And even here in the US, I assume that people will be like, oh, a woman going to school, no worries. I'm like, why are you doing all this education? Doesn't your head hurt? Like, what do you mean, doesn't my head hurt? I love science. I love doing this stuff. Come on. But I think that probably the biggest inspiration, the biggest catalyst for my journey is I'd finished high school 3 years early back in Nigeria. I was quite, smart from a young age, and I was able to skip through grades, but I was at home for almost 3 years waiting for college. And my dad was like, again, you don't really need to go to school. I'm like, okay, I'm going to find a way to go to school. And my brother and the rest of my family had found a school in Ohio, Bowling Green State University. And we got scholarships, international scholarships to study. So it was like our opportunity to get that break and get an education. But for me, it was just the starting point. I've always known that I wanted to be a doctor. It was just inside me. I always knew that I wanted to just help people. It's something that no matter how far I go in life, I ask myself, does it have an impact on humanity? I was asking myself those types of philosophical questions as a child. And so that foundation was established in me. And I was fortunate 4 years ago, the University of Connecticut, where I got my PhD in medicinal chemistry and my MBA in healthcare management, they gave me a Tradition of Excellence award. And I was like, that's good, because I think they figured out this is something that you've always had in you. But I think when people say you cannot do something, or when society tries to dictate who you can be, I think it forces people like me that have always sort of been at the outlier to say, how much do you want this? And how do you measure impact? So my education was my way of fostering my creativity from a scientific standpoint. And as an immigrant, to say, hey, by the way, America, I add value. Remember me, I add value. And, from an impact standpoint, think about the many women before me, the many women still in Africa that often don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. And to think that through my own little story that I've been able to inspire a person or two. And I even had a message this morning from a woman in Serbia that was reaching out to me about how hey, I'm not a scientist, but I find your work inspiring. To me, again, that's the beauty of the work. So my education was inspired by a desire to make an impact. It hasn't always been the easiest of journeys, but I found joy because there's been that, as you mentioned, that genuine passion for science. But what has helped me to keep going regardless is because I have a desire to establish something bigger than me, to leave a legacy that regardless of who hosts my show in the future, it will still be about amplifying scientific innovation, because it's never going to end. We're always going to have new things to think about, and the need for people that can tell us that story in a way that we can remember.
So thank you. So let's look and reflect a bit on your path as an entrepreneur. And I'm just curious, founders, when I have them on the show, I have to ask, maybe in the early days, did you ever feel alone or maybe isolated in this journey?
Oof. How much time do we have again? Okay, just checking. All right. Okay, we don't have all day. Got it. Loneliness has been a part of my journey for probably most of the time I've been in the US. I've lived in the US now almost 23 years. I've lived longer here than my country of birth. I also lived by myself for roughly 10 years. And I think just battling that, I remember when I first met my now husband, he came to my apartment and he's like, do you ever get lonely? I'm like, I never asked myself that question. But I think by the time I became more emotionally aware, and I started to work on my emotional intelligence and my social intelligence, to say, don't be robotic or methodical in your approach. Like, how do you feel? Are you checking in with yourself, or are you just on the go? So I started to train my brain. But so by the time I became an entrepreneur, I recognized those triggers in me. And I said to myself, how do I become less lonely? And believe it or not, podcasting was something that helped me with that. And I never thought at the Yale Cancer Center, while I was working on triple negative breast cancer, metabolic enzymes, that someday I'll be podcasting. Like, that was like, what is that? I never thought that would happen. But I think in some ways, it was also my way of connecting with the world and finding more meaning and purpose with others, through others. And doing this in a way that is always consistent, because even with us, how we're communicating virtually, you could communicate with anybody in the world. And I say to myself, so if you're lonely, how would anybody know how you feel if you're not reaching out? Reach out and touch somebody's hands, right? Do something, connect with a person. And that helped me to podcast, but also helped me to start writing. And through my writing to also connect with people. And that's the power of that sort of human touch. And it can only come if you allow yourself to be vulnerable and to say again, how do I feel? And there's nothing wrong with it. And then to seek a solution. See, entrepreneurs, if not for anything, we're quite innovative, right? So if you're not
Yes.
seeking a solution to your problem, how can you solve other people's problems?
Philosophical. Very good. I like it. Asking the big questions. And I firmly believe, and I am convinced, I agree with you, entrepreneurs are problem solvers.
Yeah.
It's at the basis of what their DNA, to use a medical term, it's part of their DNA. I wonder if you could share with our audience a piece of business advice that you've kind of picked up on your journey that you would be willing to pay forward now.
Oh, yeah. So my late great PhD advisor, Dr. Amy Anderson, she trained at MIT and at Harvard, and she's one of the best medicinal chemists I've ever met. She unfortunately passed away untimely before she was even 50 years of age a few years ago, and I found out quite devastating. But that people that stay in your life, not for the longest time, but they leave a long-lasting impact. And I worked in her lab for 3.5 years. And one of the best things she told me, knowing who I am, I'm not going to call myself a type A personality. I'm not going to say that I'm an activator or a natural leader or any of those things. No. But she knew who I was, like very purposeful, very sort of driven, strategic. And she's like, don't forget to smell the roses. And I'm like, well, you're a chemist. Why does this matter to you? I'm like, well, it's very important to find that balance between sort of your life and your work. And as an entrepreneur, I cannot tell you how many midnight hours I've burned. It's crazy. I for the past 3 or 4 years, I've been waking up consistently around 3 or 4 in the morning. And 6 months ago, I decided to start waking up at 5 in the morning. So, a 1 hour bonus. But I think regardless of it, if I think about that advice, it really inspired me in more ways than one. I think perhaps the most tangible way would be me moving from New York to California. And I thought people just do it. I just thought that people just move because that's what I've done. I moved from Nigeria, I moved to Ohio, I lived in Connecticut. I'm like, okay, people move. But when I moved to California, everybody's just like, why did you move here? I'm like, hey, I used to live here before San Diego. Well, San Diego is not Irvine. Irvine is not Los Angeles. Los Angeles is not. I'm like, okay, I know that all these different zones, but I'm an international citizen. And home is where my heart is. And I found a desire to build a community, but to elevate that to the next level, I started to think about ecosystems. So part of smelling the roses is stopping long enough to think about the work that you do and the impact that it has, not just on you or the people that you know, but others outside of your network, outside of your realm. So having the freedom to pursue what I want to do creatively, but also to think about the impact of the work that I do. You have to take that creative space to allow that type of processing to happen. And nobody else could have given me better advice than the woman that was very instrumental in having me put that doctor in front of my name. So I'm grateful for that.
That's sign of the balance to the personality that I see coming through so vividly here on the interview today. And I'm glad you listened to that advice. And Southern California is a great place to stop and smell the roses because we got a lot of them all over.
It is beautiful. I say to myself, if I ever stop seeing the palm trees when I'm driving in Orange County, I need like a reality check. I never want to stop seeing the beauty around me because sometimes you take it for granted. I always want to take the time to see the beauty in the world, no matter how ugly things might seem or how desolate or depressing or unpredictable life could be. I just always want to remember, again, to smell those roses.
That's fantastic. Thank you for passing that along. I'm sure you have a view on artificial intelligence, and I would love to hear your perspective on AI and how you see it influencing and impacting your industry and innovation in your industry.
Yeah, so I'm a traditional medicinal chemist. Sort of that very first step in the drug discovery process to think about, oh, what's the drug, what's the target, the people that come up with those ideas. That's me. But even back in the day when I started my PhD, I still had a lot of computational modeling in silico drug design, as we call it from a technical standpoint, where we're trying to do some docking to sort of predict what the best target would be for a potential drug. This has been going on for the past, I would say, 15 or 20 years. I think what's different in the forefront is that it's now in our faces with generative AI, with ChatGPT. I teach a biostatistics class, and I never thought that I'll have my students, typing into ChatGPT, how do I figure out what the p-value of this data set is? I'm like, what? But it's not cheating because it's open notes or open book, but it's now open internet, right? So the world evolves in a way that is Darwinian in nature, in terms of survival, natural evolution, and the people that survive are the people that are able to adapt. AI has an effect on every industry, but it's not just from a traditional drug discovery standpoint where you're using computational modeling to predict drugs. It's also about going back to the drugs that have already been approved, thinking about repurposing those drugs, finding new tools like through high throughput screening multiple libraries, multiple data sets in really rapid ways, much faster than the 10 or 14 years or so that it takes traditionally for a drug to be discovered. And from the time it takes for a drug to be discovered to the time a patient takes it. So AI is speeding up drug discovery, right? But not just that, also access to drugs and also our knowledge, education. We call it Dr. Google. People, your patients now, they're asking you a question about their prognosis and they're looking it up at the same time too. So it's like, well, and it's almost like, why are you here? Well, you are here to help people make sense of the information. And again, one of my favorite articles that I like to cite is a Harvard Business Review article. I serve as an advisory council member for Harvard. And I think one of the best things is to go back retrospectively and look at some of the articles from even back in 2003 that says that storytelling is the key to information retention. Because when we present facts in a storytelling format, people are 20 times more likely to retain that knowledge. So I'm not afraid about AI sort of taking over, because there's still a role, a very important role for humans to play in that evolution, in that journey. It's very important that we get faster access to drugs. But I also like the idea of digital therapies where, I had interviewed a gentleman for my podcast last month, and he was talking about Roga, a device that essentially stimulates the vagus nerve and helps to instantly reduce stress and anxiety. And he's focusing on the student populations because people, younger generations, are actually reporting higher stress and anxiety levels than older generations. So technology, AI, has a way to impact not just, again, traditional drug discovery, but also looking at non-therapeutic ways to get patient care in real time when they need it, and just thinking totally about what we define as that patient experience. And to close up, one of the things that I like about the transition towards value-based care, which is the standard of medicine today, is that the patient experience is going to be the ultimate barometer about what happens in a hospital setting. Did they have a good experience? Did they care? Did people stop long enough to answer their questions? Those are the types of things that we need to think, because we need to humanize the way that we talk about science so that people understand it and they can relate to it.
Yes, what an interesting time in life to have you on our show, because the whole view of medicine and vaccines and the healthcare system, it's really in an interesting state right now. So I'm really glad to have someone with your expertise here. So tell me about the future of the Sophia Consulting Firm. What's your vision?
I want, like any business, about growth and scaling, right? How many more Sophias can we get? Male Sophias, female Sophias, just people that really understand the legacy of wisdom and trying to think about their impact on humanity. I mean, no, I'm not the only person that feels that way. So I am really looking forward to building this ecosystem that I sort of hinted to. I gave a talk for NASA. I gave a webinar for NASA 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I talked about humanizing scientific storytelling, about sort of how that connects all of us, whether you're thinking about space, you're thinking about technology in real life, in any industry. It's about that relatability and connectivity. So I want to partner with more organizations. The more the merrier. That's how you build an ecosystem, because as I mentioned, this is bigger than me, and I've always wanted to do something that was bigger than me. So of course, grow skill, hire a bunch of people, but still retain that essence, which is often the challenge you have. Do I grow so quite quickly that I sort of lose sense of that essence? But I know, and I believe enough in the mission, and I invested enough time and resources in it, that I know if you believe enough in what you do, you will find the right people to partner with. And that's why I came to Orange County, with the hope that I'll find the right people to partner with.
I'm sure you are, and you will. And hopefully your appearance here on Orange County's longest running business talk show and podcast will help you.
Woo! That's the spirit.
Yeah. If someone would like to connect with you on LinkedIn, because you are right, you have a large footprint on LinkedIn, which is impressive.
Yeah.
How do they find you?
It's real simple, Sophia with a PH, Ononye, Ononye, and I'm the only person that has that name. So by the time you do the Sophia and the O and the N, I show up. And I love connecting with people. I think getting close to that 18,000 mark, why not make it 100,000 and 1 million? There's no limits to connectivity, because that's what makes the world go around. Us connecting as humans, as people that care, and people that want to make an impact.
I said at the top of the show, we had a good one planned for you, ladies and gentlemen, and I think you delivered significantly. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So enjoyed it. And thanks to the guests and to the audience, excuse me, you've been a part of Orange County's longest running business talk show. This episode is going to join our catalog of 1,500 plus shows that we've done over the years. If you happen to be an Orange County entrepreneur or nonprofit leader, and you too would like to share your story, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. If we're not already connected, send me a connection request. I'm Rick, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. Just mention that you have an interest in being a guest. And between Haley, our long-term producer, and myself, we'll be happy to get you ready for a future episode of the show. And until we all have a chance to be together again, I hope each of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.